Some people lie with words. Others lie with smiles. And INFJs notice, even when no one else does. They can't always explain it. They don't always have proof. But something feels off. A mismatch. A subtle tension. A quiet signal beneath the surface. While others are charmed by confidence, INFJs are listening for coherence. While others hear what is said, INFJs feel what is meant. This is why fake people rarely fool INFJs for long. Not because INFJs are suspicious, but because they are deeply attuned. Today, we're exploring how INFJs detect inauthentic people, why their intuition sees through masks, why surface charm doesn't impress them, and why this ability is both a gift and a burden. Slow down. Listen carefully. Because authenticity reveals itself quietly. INFJs sense emotional incongruence before logic appears. INFJs do not begin with analysis. They begin with sensation. An emotional mismatch registers before conscious thought does. Words say one thing. Tone says another. Energy says something else entirely. INFJs feel the inconsistency instantly. A compliment that feels hollow. Empathy that sounds rehearsed. Confidence that feels performative. They may not confront it. They may not name it. But their nervous system notices. For INFJs, authenticity feels aligned. Inauthenticity feels fragmented. INFJs read microbehaviors others miss. INFJs are natural pattern observers. They notice changes in tone across conversations, expressions that don't match emotion, reactions that feel delayed or strategic, stories that subtly shift depending on the audience. They are not watching to judge. They are watching because they can't turn it off. When someone is authentic, their behavior is consistent across contexts. When someone is fake, INFJs notice small cracks. Not dramatic lies, but emotional inconsistencies. INFJs feel emotional residue after interactions. One of the clearest signals INFJs rely on is how they feel after interacting with someone. Calm, grounded, clear, or drained, uneasy, confused, emotionally foggy. Fake people often leave behind emotional residue, not because they are evil, but because their inner world is misaligned. INFJs absorb this residue deeply. They may need solitude afterward to recalibrate. Over time, they associate certain people with emotional depletion and quietly step back. INFJs detect when empathy is performed, not felt. INFJs are deeply empathetic. Because of this, they recognize when empathy is real. Authentic empathy feels present. It responds naturally. It listens without agenda. Performed empathy feels scripted. The right words are there, but the emotional attunement is missing. INFJs sense when someone is saying the right thing without actually feeling it, and that absence is loud to them. INFJs notice when values shift for approval. One of the strongest red flags for INFJs is value inconsistency. When someone changes beliefs depending on who's listening, adopts opinions for popularity, expresses morals only when convenient, INFJs notice immediately. They are deeply values-driven themselves. So when values feel flexible for social gain, it signals inauthenticity. Not because INFJs expect perfection, but because they expect sincerity. INFJs feel when connection is transactional. Fake people often relate strategically. What can this person offer me? How do I appear right now? How does this benefit my image? INFJs feel this. They feel when connection lacks presence. When attention feels conditional. When warmth disappears once utility ends. INFJs crave genuine connection. So transactional behavior feels emotionally cold, even if it's polite. INFJs trust long-term patterns over first impressions. INFJs are rarely fooled by first impressions alone. They observe over time. They watch how someone treats people with no power, how they react when not admired, how they behave when nothing is gained. Authenticity remains consistent. Performance fades. INFJs wait quietly, and patterns reveal themselves. Why INFJs rarely call fake people out? INFJs usually don't expose inauthenticity publicly. Not because they don't see it, but because confrontation feels unnecessary. They prefer disengagement over drama. They simply stop investing, stop opening, stop trusting. Their boundary is silence. Why this ability can feel heavy for INFJs. Seeing through people isn't always comforting. It can feel lonely. INFJs may wish they could unsee. They may wish charm worked on them. They may wish connection felt simpler. But once authenticity is recognized, it can't be ignored. INFJs often grieve the idea of a person before accepting who they truly are. INFJs are not cynical, they are selective. This matters. INFJs do not assume everyone is fake. They believe deeply in human goodness. But they are selective about closeness. They open slowly. They trust carefully. They value depth over surface warmth. This protects their emotional energy. Why fake people often feel uncomfortable around INFJs. Some people sense that INFJs see too much. They may feel exposed, unsettled, unclear why. INFJs don't interrogate. They simply observe. And that quiet awareness can feel confronting to someone wearing a mask. INFJs sense when energy and intent do not match. One of the most overlooked aspects of INFJ intuition is their sensitivity to intent. People can say kind words while holding self-serving motives. They can act generous while seeking validation. They can appear open while remaining emotionally closed. INFJs feel this mismatch almost immediately. Intent carries an emotional frequency, and INFJs are tuned into it. They notice when warmth feels strategic instead of spontaneous. When interest feels selective instead of sincere. When generosity feels performative rather than heartfelt. To others, everything may look fine. To INFJs, something quietly rings false. INFJs notice when people mirror without meaning. Many inauthentic people mirror others to gain approval. They adopt language. They echo opinions. They reflect emotions back quickly. INFJs notice when mirroring lacks depth. Authentic resonance unfolds naturally. It includes curiosity, nuance, and personal insight. Mirroring without meaning feels empty. INFJs sense when someone agrees too quickly, aligns too easily, or lacks personal grounding. They ask internally, where is your center? Where do you actually stand? Who are you when no one is watching? When those answers feel absent, INFJs become cautious. INFJs detect emotional timing that feels calculated. Authentic emotion flows imperfectly. It hesitates. It stumbles. It sometimes arrives late. Inauthentic emotion often arrives on cue. Right when attention is needed. Right when sympathy is useful. Right when optics matter. INFJs notice emotional timing. They sense when vulnerability feels strategic rather than organic. Not because they doubt pain exists, but because they feel when pain is being used. This awareness creates distance. INFJs feel discomfort when praise feels hollow. INFJs are not easily swayed by flattery. They feel the difference between appreciation and manipulation. Authentic praise feels specific, grounded, unforced. Fake praise feels vague, overstated, disconnected from reality. INFJs often feel uneasy receiving praise that doesn't align with their actions or intentions. It feels like being seen incorrectly. And being seen incorrectly is deeply uncomfortable for an INFJ. INFJs notice when stories shift subtly over time. INFJs are natural memory keepers. They remember emotional details, context, subtle wording. When someone's story changes slightly depending on who they're speaking to, INFJs notice. Not always immediately, but eventually. Authenticity doesn't require perfection, but it does require coherence. When coherence breaks, INFJs quietly adjust their trust. INFJs sense when boundaries are performative. Fake people often talk about boundaries more than they live them. They say the right language. They use the right terms. They present emotional awareness. But their behavior doesn't match. INFJs notice when boundaries are used to control rather than protect. When self-care is used as an excuse for selfishness. When emotional language masks emotional avoidance. This dissonance is deeply uncomfortable for INFJs. INFJs feel when listening is not real listening. INFJs are deep listeners. So they notice when listening is just waiting to speak. They sense when eye contact feels empty. Responses feel rehearsed. Curiosity feels absent. Authentic listening feels present. It slows down. It adapts. Fake listening feels transactional. INFJs withdraw emotionally when they sense this. Why INFJs rarely explain their discomfort. When INFJs detect inauthenticity, they often keep it to themselves. Why? Because explaining intuition feels impossible. How do you explain a feeling without evidence? How do you justify emotional knowing? How do you articulate subtle misalignment? INFJs learn early that intuition is often dismissed. So they trust it quietly. They don't accuse. They don't confront. They simply step back. INFJs prefer distance over exposure. INFJs don't enjoy exposing fake people. Not because they fear conflict, but because it feels unnecessary. They believe truth reveals itself naturally. Time exposes inconsistencies. Pressure reveals character. Silence shows intention. INFJs let distance do the work. INFJs often feel sad, not angry, about inauthenticity. This is important. INFJs are rarely angry when they detect fake behavior. They are often disappointed. They hoped for depth. They hoped for honesty. They hoped for connection. Recognizing inauthenticity feels like a quiet loss. They grieve the potential of who someone could have been. Why INFJs struggle in image-driven cultures. Cultures that reward performance over integrity exhaust INFJs. Space is where image matters more than substance. Appearance outweighs ethics. Noise replaces meaning. INFJs feel out of place. They may perform briefly, but it drains them quickly. They crave environments where truth matters more than optics. INFJs value consistency over charisma. Charisma impresses others. Consistency reassures INFJs. They trust people who behave the same when unseen, treat everyone with respect, act according to values even when inconvenient. This quiet reliability matters more than charm. INFJs are drawn to imperfect honesty. INFJs do not need people to be polished. They need them to be real. Messy emotions feel safer than fake composure. Awkward honesty feels better than smooth deception. They are drawn to people who are willing to admit, "I don't know. I'm struggling. I was wrong." Authenticity builds trust faster than perfection ever could. Why INFJs feel responsible for emotional truth. INFJs often feel a responsibility to truth. Not just factual truth, but emotional truth. They feel compelled to live honestly, even when it's uncomfortable. So when others don't, it feels heavy. Not judgmental. Heavy. INFJs can sense self-betrayal in others. One of the deepest signals INFJs detect is self-betrayal. When someone suppresses their own values, ignores their intuition, performs a version of themselves for approval, INFJs feel it. They recognize it because they've fought that battle internally themselves. Seeing it in others evokes empathy and sadness. Why INFJs often attract inauthentic people at first. There is a quiet paradox many INFJs experience. Despite their ability to detect inauthenticity, they often attract people who are not fully real with themselves. This happens because INFJs carry a calm, accepting presence. They listen without judgment. They offer emotional safety. They make others feel seen. For people who live behind masks, this feels relieving. They feel less pressure to perform, less pressure to impress, less pressure to be exposed. At least at first. INFJs become mirrors where others project who they want to be. But projection is not connection. And eventually, the truth surfaces. INFJs feel when someone is performing for them. Some people sense that INFJs value depth. So they try to perform it. They use emotional language. They share vulnerability quickly. They mirror INFJ values. But INFJs feel when depth is rushed. Authentic vulnerability unfolds slowly. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It includes uncertainty and discomfort. Performed depth feels polished. INFJs sense when someone is trying to impress rather than connect. This creates a quiet withdrawal. INFJs detect when apologies lack integration. One subtle way INFJs detect inauthenticity is through apologies. A real apology carries reflection. It acknowledges impact. It leads to change. A fake apology focuses on appearance. "I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't mean it like that. Let's move on." INFJs notice when words don't lead to altered behavior. They don't need perfection. They need growth. When apologies repeat without integration, trust erodes. INFJs sense when people avoid inner work. INFJs are deeply introspective. They examine motives. They reflect on patterns. They take responsibility for their inner world. So they notice when others avoid this work. When someone blames constantly, deflects responsibility, avoids self-examination, INFJs sense stagnation. Not judgment, but awareness. They recognize that without inner work, authenticity cannot grow. INFJs feel when humor is used as deflection. Humor can be healing, but it can also be avoidance. INFJs notice when jokes appear right after discomfort. When sarcasm replaces vulnerability. When lightness prevents depth. They sense when humor is used to avoid truth. This doesn't repel INFJs immediately, but it signals limitation. They know how far connection can go. INFJs notice when kindness is conditional. Authentic kindness is consistent. It does not disappear when attention shifts, boundaries are set, validation is withheld. INFJs notice when warmth fades after resistance. When generosity becomes transactional. When care is offered only when rewarded. This conditionality feels deeply unsafe to INFJs. They slowly disengage. INFJs sense emotional inflation. Some people exaggerate emotion to gain closeness. Big reactions. Intense declarations. Rapid attachment. INFJs feel when emotion is inflated rather than grounded. Real emotion has gravity. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. INFJs are cautious around emotional intensity without stability. INFJs read silence as much as speech. INFJs listen to what isn't said. They notice avoidance, delayed responses, shifts in availability. When someone claims care but disappears when it matters, INFJs notice. Consistency matters more than reassurance. INFJs don't seek to unmask people. This is important. INFJs are not investigators. They are not hunters of truth. They simply observe. And when something feels off, they adjust proximity. No accusation. No exposure. Just distance. INFJs often grieve what could have been. Recognizing inauthenticity isn't satisfying. It's sad. INFJs mourn potential. They mourn imagined depth. They mourn the connection they hoped for. This grief is quiet, often invisible. INFJs value transparency over perfection. They don't need people to have everything figured out. They need honesty. Messy truth is safer than polished illusion. They respect those who admit, "I'm still learning. I don't know yet. I made a mistake." This transparency builds trust faster than charm ever could. INFJs are drawn to those who are aligned, not impressive. They look for values lived quietly, integrity under pressure, presence without performance. These qualities stand out to INFJs, even if they go unnoticed by others. INFJs accept that authenticity is rare. This realization is bittersweet. INFJs come to understand that many people are surviving, not self-reflecting. And that's okay. But it means closeness will be limited. INFJs stop expecting depth everywhere. They conserve energy. INFJs choose fewer connections, but truer ones. Over time, INFJs cultivate smaller circles. Not out of elitism, but out of emotional honesty. They choose resonance over reach. And when connection is real, they give fully. INFJs detect fake people not because they distrust humanity, but because they believe in something deeper. They believe in alignment, in sincerity, in truth lived quietly. Their intuition is not a weapon. It is a compass, guiding them towards spaces where they can remain real, and away from those that require masks. If you are an INFJ who has ever felt lonely because you see what others overlook, remember this. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It is the reason your connections, when they happen, are real. And real connection, though rare, is worth the wait. INFJs are not trying to be superior. This matters deeply. INFJs do not see themselves as better. They simply value alignment. They hold themselves to the same standard they sense in others. They don't expect perfection. They expect sincerity. INFJs value alignment over appearance. Authenticity, to an INFJ, means alignment. Words align with actions. Values align with behavior. Emotion aligns with expression. When alignment exists, INFJs feel safe. When it doesn't, they pull away. Not in anger. In clarity. INFJs eventually accept that not everyone wants to be real. This acceptance comes slowly, painfully. INFJs learn that some people prefer comfort over truth, performance over depth, approval over alignment. And INFJs stop trying to pull them toward authenticity. They let go. INFJs detect fake people not because they search for flaws, but because they are tuned to truth. They listen beyond words. They feel beneath behavior. They trust what lingers after interaction ends. This sensitivity can feel isolating in a world full of masks. But it also protects something rare: the ability to stay real. And in the end, INFJs would rather stand alone in authenticity than belong in illusion.